wordiness and redundancy, cliché, and passive voice. Each of these can obscure meaning or weaken impact if left unaddressed. So we'll look at clear examples and better alternatives throughout. We'll start with dangling modifiers. These are descriptive phrases that don't clearly attach to anything in the sentence. When a sentence opens with one, but the subject is missing or mismatched, it causes confusion. Let's look at this sentence. Running quickly after dropping the files, the hallway echoed with footsteps as the intern's panic increased. The participial phrase, running quickly after dropping the files, seems to describe the hallway, which obviously can't run. The modifier is dangling. It needs to be closer to the subject it's actually describing, the intern. So, how might we fix it? We know the intention of this sentence. An intern drops some files and runs away in a panic. I'm kind of curious now. Was he not allowed to drop the files, and he did so? He's afraid he's going to get fired? Did he see somebody about to steal his cupcake, so he dropped the files in his haste to secure his property? Whatever the case may be, as a copy editor, it is your job to make sure that the intern drops his files and runs down the hallway in a grammatically appropriate fashion. This is an acceptable fix that maintains the author's intent. After dropping the files, the intern broke into a run, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. How about this sentence? In 2020, while visiting her old roots, the pandemic swept through the US. This version makes it sound like the pandemic visited her roots. What roots are those? H1N1? Swine flu? Smallpox? A better revision adds a subject, hopefully a corporeal one. In 2020, while she was visiting her old roots, the pandemic swept through the US. Here's another. Born in Lithuania in 1937, Harold and his family were forced to go into hiding when he was only 4 years old. The phrase, born in Lithuania in 1937, appears to modify Harold and his family. But his entire family was not born in 1937. Harold, who was born in Lithuania in 1937, was forced to go into hiding with his family when he was only 4 years old. Misplaced modifiers aren't necessarily dangling, but they are too far from the word they're meant to describe. That creates confusion or unintended meaning. Let's look at an example. She wore a yellow hat on her head, which was clearly much too big. Here, on her head is in the wrong place. It makes it sound like her head was too big, which, while it might be true, is likely something we should keep to ourselves. A simple rearrangement clears up the confusion and makes it a socially acceptable statement. She wore a yellow hat, which was clearly much too big. This also removes some redundancy because where else would you wear a hat? Let's try a harder one. At the time that Rubinstein met Gruber, he was a pastor at a church in East Berlin. This sentence is tricky. It's unclear who was the pastor, Rubinstein or Gruber. The fix is to rephrase so the subject is clearly linked to the modifier. When Rubinstein met him, Gruber was a pastor at a church in East Berlin. Ambiguous antecedents happen when it's unclear what a pronoun is referring to. This makes readers stop and reread. He told Alex that he needed to leave immediately. Who needed to leave? The speaker or Alex? A simple name substitution instead of repeating he would clarify this. Take a look at the chart. On the left, if the he in the sentence refers to Alex, there are two possible ways to fix this. 1. He told Alex to leave immediately. Or 2. He told Alex, you need to leave immediately. If he is the unknown speaker, the fixes are either 1. He told Alex that he himself needed to leave immediately. Or better, because the first solution still sounds a bit awkward with the repetition of the reflexive pronoun himself, too. Knowing couldn't stay any longer, he told Alex that he had to leave immediately. This is where you need to use your judgment. Would you rather leave the sentence slightly awkward or edit more heavily, which has the potential to skew author intent? Let's take a close look at this sentence, which appears at first to be elegant and complex, but suffers from pronoun ambiguity. While Eliot's invocation of classical myth destabilizes temporal continuity, the disruption of linear narrative also serves to heighten emotional realism, though this was not his stated intent. The problem lies in the word this. We don't know exactly what this refers to. Does it refer to the destabilization of temporal continuity, the disruption of linear narrative, or the heightening of emotional realism? Each of these could logically be not his intent, but the sentence doesn't make it clear, so readers are forced to guess what the author meant.
Overloaded sentences can bury your point and frustrate your readers. Let's take a real example from a manuscript draft. Rarely have I tried to wade into debate about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but the current Israel-Hamas war in Gaza forces me to confront my long-standing hesitancy to speak about the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians. It forces me to reconsider my hesitancy to speak, forces me to try to say something about the war in Gaza and its implications for Christian-Jewish relations. The writer's honesty and vulnerability are clear, but they're obscured by clunky construction, repetitive phrasing, and unnecessary qualifiers. Let's see if we can clean it up while preserving the core message.
Tried to is filler. It a priori weakens the argument and mitigates blame.
Wade into tends to carry a tone of informality or even recklessness. It undermines the seriousness and intentionality of the reflection. Entered into works better because it suggests a more thoughtful, deliberate engagement with the issue. Since Israeli-Palestinian conflict is already mentioned earlier in the sentence, repeating Israel-Hamas here is redundant. The war in Gaza is more concise and still clear in context. Hesitancy appears twice in the paragraph. Using reluctance for the first instance improves variety and offers a stronger, more natural fit in context. The phrase, "speak about the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians," is redundant in this position. Ending the sentence on reluctance is stronger rhythmically and avoids the circular repetition that's weighing the paragraph down. The repetition of forces in close proximity dulls its impact. Replacing the second instance with compels strengthens the tone. Compels suggests a deeper internal drive or moral urgency, which better fits the reflective nature of this sentence. To speak is unnecessary after my hesitancy, which already implies speech or expression in this context. Cutting it sharpens the rhythm and avoids an awkwardly literal phrasing that adds no new meaning. Since the first forces has been changed to compels, the second should be changed as well to preserve parallel structure and rhetorical cohesion. Try to is unnecessary. It softens the impact of the sentence and dilutes the sense of agency or resolve. Removing it results in a stronger, more direct construction. The war in Gaza can be shortened to simply the war. We already know which war. We don't need to be hit on the head with it 50 times. Here's the revision. Rarely have I entered into debate about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but the current war in Gaza forces me to confront my long-standing reluctance. It compels me to reconsider my hesitancy, compels me to say something about the war and its implications for Christian-Jewish relations. This revision doesn't fix everything. Some rhetorical choices and stylistic tone could still be refined, but this is a solid copy edit, tight, readable, and true to the original intent. That's the heart of good editing.
Here are some common phrases that add length but not meaning. Look out for these. They're almost always cuttable. Here's a non-exhaustive list of phrases where one word already does the heavy lifting and the other is just loitering. Phrases like same exact, end result, and personal opinion might fly in casual conversation, but in writing they tend to signal a certain lack of, let's call it editorial refinement. And then there's added bonus, which, if you think about it too long, starts to unravel. Was there already a bonus? Is this bonus just piling on? Serious crisis is another gem, as opposed to what? A whimsical crisis? Even in well-crafted prose, cliché creeps in through worn rhetorical habits. These clichés don't always look like tired idioms. They manifest as predictable argument structures, mechanical transitions, and overused metaphors. They flatten nuance, obscure originality, and risk alienating attentive readers. Cliché can still be effective, in moderation, as satire, or for tonal contrast. The key is to use it intentionally. Even better when the use is self-aware, adding a layer of irony, familiarity, or rhetorical texture without sounding lazy or automatic. Consider these examples. What is not said about the servant may be just as important as what is. The silence is deafening in its theological implication. Used sparingly and with purpose, this cliché underscores the tension between presence and absence. Rest assured, unless the past is fictional, I did at one time walk. This self-aware use of cliché adds irony and emotional distance, signaling voice and tone. Whatever the motivation to topple an entrenched hierarchy within the church, once in motion, there would be no stopping the Reformation. The cliché functions here to amplify inevitability without disrupting the historical narrative. Cliché fails when it replaces precision with habit, relies on formulaic scaffolding, or reduces complex ideas to hollow buzzwords. What sounds polished on the surface can mask vague thinking or a lack of original insight. Consider these examples. The author sheds light on the human condition through a tapestry of narratives that speak truth to power. This mashup of familiar phrases avoids saying anything specific. The imagery is broad and the claim lacks substance. This chapter will explore the intersection of identity and resistance, unpacking how marginalized voices challenge dominant narratives. While it gestures at depth, it relies on academic scaffolding instead of fresh insight. The language sounds important, but says little. By leaning into discomfort and holding space for transformation, we can disrupt the status quo and catalyze real change. This reads like motivational filler. The rhythm is polished, but the meaning is vague and inflated, more TED Talk than thesis. In each case, cliché smooths over complexity, but at the cost of clarity, authenticity, and intellectual rigor. Watch for these patterns in your writing. If a phrase sounds like it belongs in a TED Talk or marketing brochure, it probably isn't serving your ideas. Passive voice occurs when the subject of the sentence receives the action rather than performs it. It's typically formed using a version of the verb to be followed by a past participle. Let's look at a simple example. The book was written by me. In this sentence, the book is the subject and it's receiving the action. Was is the past tense form of the verb to be. Written is the past participle of write. And by me is a prepositional phrase that functions adverbially, modifying the verb, phrase, and indicating the agent, the one who performed the action. This is a textbook example of the passive voice. As editors, it's our job to decide whether this construction helps or hinders the clarity, tone, or intent of the sentence. When to avoid the passive voice. In clear, concise writing, when the agent or doer is important. In persuasive or journalistic writing, when it's okay or good, when the doer is unknown or unimportant. To emphasize the action or result. In scientific or formal writing, let's look at some examples. Biblical texts are often interpreted through a modern political lens. This sentence is vague about who is doing the interpreting. A clearer, more direct version would be, modern scholars often interpret biblical texts through a political lens. Shifting to active voice adds specificity and energy. It is hoped that this structural reformulation will aid dialogue between traditions. Again, we have a passive construction, it is hoped, that hides the subject. A stronger revision would be, we hope this structural reformulation will aid dialogue between traditions. This makes the sentence more confident and direct. Now consider, the structure of participation is to be understood as a concept of presence rather than possession. In this case, the passive voice is appropriate. The focus is on the concept being conveyed, not on who is doing the understanding. Finally, data were collected from multiple sources. This is another appropriate use of passive voice, especially in academic or scientific writing. The emphasis is on the process and results, not on the person performing the task. In summary, passive voice isn't wrong, but in some cases, switching to active voice makes your writing clearer and more engaging. Now let's listen to a book description, first written in the active voice, and then rewritten entirely in the passive voice. It's the exact same content, no meaning has been lost. First, the active version. Told through interwoven voices across planes of existence, free will explores what it means to be seen, chosen, and changed. Set in an alternate reality England during World War II, where magic pulses quietly beneath the surface of the everyday, this genre-bending new adult romantasy blends emotional realism with the uncanny. And now the passive makeover. Told through interwoven voices across planes of existence, what it means to be seen, chosen, and changed is explored in free will. An alternate reality England during World War II is where the story is set, where magic is pulsed quietly beneath the surface of the everyday, and emotional realism is blended with the uncanny in this genre-bending new adult romantasy. See? Nothing technically wrong, just slower, flatter, somehow both overworked and underwhelming. The first version drives the narrative. The second one drags it behind the car. That's the real issue with passive voice. It's not that it's ungrammatical, it's that it's often unnecessary. If you're writing lab reports, use it. If you're writing marketing copy, don't. And if you're writing fiction or anything meant to move a reader, use the active voice like you mean it. Read it out loud. I promise you will know immediately which one is the overachiever and which one drags its feet like a 10-part TikTok. If you know, you know. That brings us to the end of our section on clarity and flow, where we've seen how misplaced modifiers, ambiguous references, wordiness, cliché, and passive voice can all quietly undermine a text's effectiveness. Next, we'll shift our focus to grammar, specifically the kinds of errors that often slip through even careful copy edits. These include overlooked verb agreements, faulty parallelism, misused words, and other small but consequential issues that can erode precision and credibility.